Welcome to this episode of Action Items. We are here every Friday of the month at 10 a.m. Eastern, and I am glad to have you join me today. This episode is brought to you by NewGen Architects, a digital transformation consultant agency helping businesses navigate the complex world of technology and supply chain management. The NGA team of supply chain experts works with clients in all phases of the implementation lifecycle, from initial planning to post-implementation support, including things like tool selection, project management, and business transformation roadmap. To learn more about how NGA can support your business scale, please visit newgenarchitects.com for more information and to schedule a free discovery session with a member of our team. So, October and November in supply chain world are super busy, and I want to share a little bit about the ongoings with the team and a lot of the educational and training sessions that I have been doing myself. So last week, or maybe the week before, November 10th today, this was October 29th to October 31st in DC, the CMAA annual conference for construction management was held, and I did what I will think was a great session about digital supply chain fundamentals for construction. And why am I sharing that? I am sharing that because I really want to encourage any supply chain professionals, new, seasoned veterans, if you are looking for an industry that is ripe for supply chain improvement and innovation, it is a great industry to start to get into, especially if you're looking at industrialized construction and that marriage of manufacturing and construction. If you have experience, especially in a made to order or assemble to order environment with procurement of systems, so IT procurement or materials, direct or indirect, labor or services, as well as any experience with logistics or manufacturing, I highly recommend that you take a look at this industry. There's a lot of cool things going on. Speaking of industrialized construction and speaking of October and November being super busy, next week is going to be pretty hopping in supply chain. So I'll be speaking at the Offsite Construction Expo here in Atlanta on Wednesday, digital supply chain fundamentals again, specifically for offsite construction. And then the Women in Supply Chain Forum is going to be in Tuesday and Wednesday. And then Procurement Foundry Forge event is going to be in Atlanta Wednesday to Friday. So lots of overlap, looking forward to seeing a lot of friends. And then at the end of the month, going into December, COP28 is going to be happening. Climate change is obviously, as we know, supply chain has a really big role in that. I always say that we're uniquely positioned to solve a lot of climate change, sustainability, and circular economy problems and challenges because we happen to be part of the problem within the supply chain. So I'm very much looking forward to, during that time, also be hosting Deborah Dole here on the show to talk about data and analytics and systems that we can be using within supply chain to track those ESG goals and, really be talking about how to effectively execute on reduction of carbon emissions within the supply chain, as well as decarbonization in general. So that is going to be happening, as well as at the same time, the Big Five Global Construction Conference in Dubai. So just a crazy next 30 days. So if you will be in Atlanta or Dubai during any of those events, please reach out. I would love to meet you. I would love to connect and talk about how we can improve supply chain planning and management within manufacturing and construction industries, as well as how we can use data analytics and automation to accelerate all of our collective community ecosystem global goals around supply chain. So let me take a look and see who we have here. Joanne Zelli, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Felton, Christopher, you said additive manufacturing is big in that industry. I imagine that you're talking about industrialized construction. So please tell me more. Tell us all more here in the comments or reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. I'd love to chat more. Let's now, without any further ado, because I'm sure you guys are done listening to me talk all by myself, let's bring up Joy so that we can start talking about systems thinking and all things systems implementations. So before we get into that, Joy, just tell us who you are. As I know, you are a badass, and I think isn't your website or like your personal brand the GOAT? Like,
yes, supply chain GOAT. Yes,
of all time. As
yes.
the greatest of all time. So I'm honored to have the supply chain GOAT here on the show.
Thank you.
Tell everyone, 30 seconds to a minute, if you can condense it into that, of just your experience in supply chain, digital automation, and you actually chose this topic.
Yes.
So tell everyone why you wanted to talk about systems thinking and why it's important for us to start to talk about it more within the supply chain space.
Awesome. Thank you, DC. Thanks for having me. So my name is Joy McDaniel, and I have been in the supply chain room for 23 years now, and I have an array of experience of pretty much every commodity you can think of. I love supply chain. I bleed it. It's just something that I believe I was born with. I've worked. Right now, I'm working more in the technological space. So I'm working with data migration and data transformations and things like that for certain companies. Yeah. So I'm kind of learning more of the different side of supply chain because like this just came like it's just became a sexy word like 2 years ago, digital transformation. So I'm happy to be in that space. But yeah, my experience goes back to 90. I'm telling my age here. Sorry.
Yeah.
Goes back to 2001, and I just love it. And so the topic that I chose today was systems thinking, and the reason why I chose that topic is because it's new and it's fresh, and I don't think a lot of supply chain professionals understand that skill set that they have. They just do it because like literally if you're successful in supply chain, you're going to have that systems thinking mind frame and work ethic in you. So I just, because I was trying to figure out like, why is it that I go to all these projects in these jobs and I am like on A and they're on A, but I'm already seeing like what Z is going to look like based off of what this decision of A looks like. So it's something that I felt was huge in the supply chain realm that needs to be discussed. So that's why I'm here, and that's my background. 23 years.
And you're teaching now, right?
Yes, I am. Yes,
you're teaching, and you're on a board, which is really important because
yes.
you are using all of your experience to mold the new minds of supply chain. I say it all the time that like at least the stuff that I learned, and I got my master's in engineering management. There were some supply chain planning courses, and that wasn't that long ago, or maybe it was, and I feel like it wasn't that long ago. But anyway, I feel like what I learned is kind of like, it's great to know the fundamentals, but so much in the world has changed that it's almost like I need to go back to school again.
Yeah, a lot of people feel that way. And thanks for bringing that up. I'm such a layered person when it comes to supply chain. I've done so much. So thanks for reminding me. But yes, I do. I'm an adjunct professor for Oakland County Community College, and I helped develop their first supply chain curriculum. So that's going to start in January, and I'm super excited about that. I love to teach. I love to, educate folks on supply chain and just understand like the whole links and everything that goes into that whole mechanism. So yes, that is something that I'm doing. I'm excited about.
Okay, perfect. Jordan, will you please go ahead and pull up our article from Supply Chain Digest? And we're not going to go through the whole thing. I really just want, for the sake of our conversation, when we say systems thinking, what does it look like? David Schneider, big thought leader in the industry, and he has, I think, articulated it very well. An approach to problem solving that looks at a problem not as an isolated challenge, but rather in the context of the larger system in which a particular function or process operates. And like the supply chain, the system is a combination of people, structures, processes, environments, we know, like you mentioned, as supply chain professionals, it's not
Mhm.
only within the four walls of the organization, but you have your external suppliers, your customers, your 3PLs, 4PLs, anything like that all makes up that entire system. And I think this is a really good definition to kind of get us on the same page when we're talking about software implementations, because it's very easy, and I think we've both seen this in our experience. It's very easy to say, oh, I need an inventory management tool, or I need a demand planning tool, or I need a production planning tool. And then, and I think that with the data flows, that is really where we're starting to see more of like, oh, but you know that this comes in and this comes out. So it's not just this one system you have to think
Right.
about. Or let me use my words properly. It's not this one tool you have to think about or this one challenge, but how does it fit into the entire system? So excuse me. So with our first action item, which I actually don't remember what it is. What is our first action item? We can go ahead and put that on the screen. So create a system diagram. So what is your system? You know, and I guess I would say, I would ask you, how do you think creating a system diagram is different from like a supply chain network diagram?
Yeah. So with that, it's the supply chain network is kind of siloed. It makes it seem as if supply chain is a department, which it is kind of sort of, but it's really not. It's a
But it's
whole
also
ecosystem of
not.
things.
We know
Right.
that. It's also the
Exactly.
lifeblood of the organization.
Exactly, because we touch everything. Supply chain touches everything, literally. And I don't think that a lot of folks realize that, but literally every single department, there isn't one department that I have found in my experience that supply chain has not touched. So when you look at it from an ecosystem and from an entire supply chain point of view, you get to understand, okay, how the decisions that you're making, how do they impact accounting? How do they impact distribution, logistics, purchasing, things like that. So having that holistic view of just cause and effect of the decisions that you're making and having that systems thinking, being able to come in and understand like, okay, we're going to do this decision. We're going to do decision A, but this is going to affect the department, whatever. So,
and I think, you know what, David does a good job in his article of, I can't remember where it was, but it said something like, when was the last time have you really seen somebody do a causal diagram? And I thought about it and I was like, I have, I see a lot of check sheets. I see
right.
a lot of,
Mm-hmm.
how often is this thing happening? We talk about the 5 whys,
Mm-hmm.
but like a causal diagram, I have not seen since I was in school. And someone
Yeah.
told me like, hey, this is a tool you can use, but I don't
Mm-hmm.
know anyone who actually uses it.
Yeah, they don't, and it's such a good tool. I mean, it puts everything on the forefront. So before you're making decisions, you're understanding the whole like cause and effect of your decisions, how it's going to affect this and this and that all around, right? You're not operating in silos, and that's the biggest thing. Is getting those silos broken down and getting more teams and departments involved in this decision making, right? And having KPIs not just focus on what that particular department is doing, but how that particular department affects someone else, right? Say for instance, sales. Like, okay, great, you sold, let's say $5 million above your quota, but how does that impact
That gives
production?
me anxiety as the production
I know.
manager.
I said that gives, when we talk about sales, trust me, yes, we get it. We get. That's why I just love speaking with you, because you get it. But yeah, it's like sales and supply chain. It's like there's always this back and forth in this gray area there. Like, okay, great, you met your quota and you get this brand new Jeep Cherokee. You get this nice trip because of your awards. But in supply chain, we're impacting our inventory, we're impacting our production, our labor, and we're impacting our KPIs by trying to adjust for last minute, creep ins. And so having that holistic view to me, and like setting KPIs to where it's not just your department, but what is your effect, as is what I have found in my experience. And that's a system thinking. Like literally, that's exactly what systems thinking is from a work output point of view. You're not just going off of what your department specifically is doing in that silo, but how does it affect the downstream? Because it most of the time it doesn't really add up to a positive thing, because you're impacting other positions in other parts of the organization. So you're going to even out or either like actually lose money, if that makes sense.
Right.
So that's what I've seen. And and like I said, I've been doing this for 23 years. And I've always been able to come in and, understand like, okay, well, we're going to do this, but then this is going to affect accounting. This is going to affect distribution. This is going to affect the production floor. And so that's the skill set that I feel and that I know is like definitely paramount to our industry, just so that we have what I call a success chain. And honestly, I am.
Tell me more. I haven't heard that. A success chain. What is
so?
that?
Yes, I that's my Bible. I've coined that word because I feel that when you
is there a book? Is there a blog?
No.
Is there some?
I'm going to get on that. Thank you.
Okay.
I definitely need to, because I call it a success chain. And when I come into my projects and I work with my clients, then I am coming in from a success chain point of view, not just supply chain, because I feel that when you think of it that way, you are thinking more of the silo environment, right? And it just adds to the already siloed, issues that we have going on. So when it's coined as success chain, you're actually working on the success of the entire chain. You're working on the success of the business, not just supply chain. Because honestly, I mean, I've been doing this for 23 years, and my mom and my dad, like they literally still don't know what supply chain is. And it's really hard to explain because you do so much, we hit everything. Right. Mm-hmm. And so when the average person thinks about supply chain, they're like logistics, distribution, planning and things like that. But it's so much more.
All of that. It's all.
Yes.
I wish I had thought about, and I didn't think about this before, but we actually have a diagram that we start with, just how we say, okay, what is systems thinking? Let's get everyone on the same page. Whenever I talk to people, I always say, what is supply chain? When I say, let's talk about supply chain, yes, what am I talking about? Here is the diagram of all the business functions, all of the strategic processes, S&OP, your financial strategy, your governance and risk management, absolutely, and then all of the systems that support that, your CRM, your WMS, your TMS. And right, so many people think, well, we don't have a TMS. Well, are you doing, like, somebody you work with has a TMS? You know
right,
what I mean?
exactly.
And they need data and they need information from you in order to be able to, like you mentioned, ensure profitability and
exactly
margins. And it's so interesting to me how I was at actually I don't remember where I was, but somebody was saying, we're always talking about sustainability and, the circular economy and reduction of waste and reduction of overproduction, et cetera. And yes, it feels good. We love it. It feels good, but it's also good for business because you don't keep producing more than what you need anyway. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, if you have these systems, processes, tools, data in place between not just, again, what you've been saying, your silo, but everything, it ultimately contributes to being better for the environment, but also being better for business.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you for that point. You are absolutely correct. It's just a whole ecosystem. Mm-hmm. And like I said, silos is the main culprit of why we have these breakdowns, in my opinion. And even from, I like to drill down. I'll go down the rabbit hole in a minute, for anything I'm interested in. And so going down, even, the
how are we in AP management and AR management from production planning? How did you get us here, Joy? Exactly. Let's sit down until, like, what is the problem?
Right. But yeah, I just feel like, not just silos, but communication. We have to talk and understand each other, understand each other's goals and how we impact that. For instance, production and procurement, they have a huge connection that I have not seen been talked about or understood. But just think about it. Your production floor, your receiving team, they're the ones who's getting the first-hand information about how stuff is coming in, whether or not your suppliers are adhering to whatever the standards were, whatever the qualification, whatever it is that they need to be doing. They're the ones that have that first knowledge of how this is coming in, right? And so not having that communication with that level of your labor is doing a disadvantage, because how many times have I been, oh my gosh, I love interacting with everyone, regardless of where you are in the supply chain, from the production floor to the C-suite. I love it all, right? So,
which I think comes from your ability to see how the entire system is connected. Because everybody
Exactly.
would not say that.
Exactly. But it's like you have to be, in order to make sure that you have a good, ecosystem of support, because literally it boils down to relationship management and understanding and accountability, honestly, because nobody likes their name on any type of list that is like causes some type of adverse effect on the business, right? But like there's been so many times where, not to be jumping all over the place, but let me just go here. But
Not to go on a tangent, but I'm going to go on a tangent.
Yeah, exactly. But like production floor, like there's been so many times that I've been saved and like have had like so many problems, for the beginning of the onset of the issue, growing into 5 heads, whatever. They're like, if they understand what these suppliers are required to do, and not just receiving and just take whatever you get, you get that communication and you're able to resolve those things right in the beginning, right?
They can escalate that this thing is already happening because they
Right.
know it should not be happening this way.
Exactly. It's just this one, for instance, and it cracks me up because this logistics company, they, you have the seal that you have to cut off and things like that when you get there. But every time this trailer would arrive, the seal would be cut off, right? And I'm like, wait a minute, you're supposed to come here with the seal, intact.
Right.
And so nobody on the receiving team understood that, okay, well, this is not a LTL. This is not like a combination of other suppliers. This is our truck, and we have it, dedicated to our routes. And so with that
Security,
being said, like
risk management, compliance, like there are so many. Yes. It's a tiny little thing.
Yeah.
If you don't understand your role in the entire system, for you, it's like, oh, whatever, the seal is
exactly. And it was going to receive it in. And like a lot of times with that experience, we had a particular product that could not, like literally could not be in the same truck because of damage, because of quality issues, and the way that product was like packaged, right? So we were receiving in all this damaged material, and everybody's like, what's going on? And so eventually, getting out there, getting your hands dirty, and putting on those steel toe boots, going out there and just taking a picture. Okay, what's going on here? How are we receiving these in? And like I said, having people in these conversations, that we don't have right now, production, you're receiving, just everyone, they have the first look at what is coming off the line, right? And what is coming in. So like I said, engagement and breaking down these silos, and not just involving, quote, the white collar,
corporate,
team, corporate,
planners, right?
Team into that. It needs to go down a lot deeper. And not only that, but you empower your employees because they're a part of something, right? And so when they're a part of something, it just makes things, they're going to want to let you know, because it's going to make them feel good and make them have a value system and value what they're doing, instead of just, receiving whatever in. And it's just like, okay, put it over on rack 823. Well, no, we got to check for this. We got to check for that, so that, in my experience, has been a game changer. And I know a lot of people don't like to talk about, things at that level, when you get down there, but it matters.
Yes, it does matter. Yeah. And that from people that I've talked to who have had successful implementations, that is one of the things that they attribute to the successful implementation, is being on the floor.
Absolutely.
And talking to the people who are doing the work, and then taking that information and figuring out, okay, what does that mean for this new tool? What does that mean for this new software? But that is almost always at the top of the list, is actually talking to the users. And I get it. You can only do so much of that. But one thing, I did a plant tour through Women in Manufacturing a couple months ago. And one of the things I noticed about the manufacturer is that they have basically like a suggestion box on the floor for the operators to say, okay, this isn't working, or we could improve this. And they actually looked at those, and they actually improved their manufacturing operations, and looked at tools, and looked at automation options, and looked at new, machinery based off of the inputs from the actual line workers on the floor. So I will say, Chris said that success chain has already been trademarked by something that actually has nothing to do with supply chain or
well, here we go.
So you have to find a new name. You have to find a new name. And then I do want to go ahead. I've been trying to think of when to work in the different action items. let's just put them all up on the screen and then continue our conversation, because we're kind of just touching up on everything. So documenting the data flows, I mentioned that as like especially if you're looking at software implementations, because it's really easy to say, oh, like we're going to get this from the data lake, but where is it coming from to get into the data lake? And a lot of companies don't even do that. They just like, let me connect directly to the ERP, let me connect directly to this other system. But I think that when we start to really look at the data flows, one thing that I have seen in my experience is that you can actually get this data from different places. But do you see those different places have the same value?
Right.
And which, if not, which it normally does not, which is the source of truth? And looking at all of those different data points, I think is now really opening up the idea of the system. And then I think one of the other ones, what's our other action item? Let me take a look. SIPOC. I love SIPOC, and I use SIPOC in not just in supply chain, but in any business function, in any department. I always encourage the team: suppliers, input, process, output, and customer. If you do that for every single thing, you have to start with, okay, what's the process, but who's giving me information to start it? What is the trigger to start the process? And then now what happens? Who am I giving it to once this thing has happened? You do that enough times and you can figure out what the system is. And then the last one, which I think, and I actually want to talk about this one more, since we technically have a lot of time left, and our time goes from a lot of time to no time very quickly. Since we have a lot of time, standing up and empowering a center of excellence or a program manager, someone who gets it. Because it can't just be the people in procurement or the people in production that are saying like, hey, the executives don't know what they're doing. Like, how do you bubble that up through all of the different layers of management? You have to have like a center of excellence, call it a continuous improvement office, call it whatever you want, but there has to be a team or a department that is empowered and respected to actually kind of have this systems thinking perspective. Otherwise, we don't really get there. And I'm curious to know what your opinion is about that. And then if you've seen anyone like successfully do that.
Well, I've seen it, be successful in many different experiences. And, of course, there isn't a team name or a department name for it. It's just like the thinkers, right? And so honestly, like from having one like SME from each department that knows their department and understands what we just talked about, like understanding the different links, how they're going to affect, others and other links on the chain, having an understanding within not just the systems thinking supply chain folks, but having one person from each team, or even like the director, whoever is managing the team, be able to take these ideas or these goals and say, okay, well, yes, this is great, but how are we going to, being able to just trickle that information down from a unsiloed point of view, right? And not just focusing on what you're doing. And I always go back to sales, because sales is, we already know how they are. So sales is like the main.
Well, also, I love that you keep talking about sales, because when I go to a lot of conferences, there's a lot of folks, and I think just in general, when people think about growth, they think about sales. How can I get more revenue? How can I get more customers? How can I get, my brand out there more? And I've listened to sales trainers, which of course their opinion is biased, as is mine. But they say, what's the most important part of running your business? Sales. And I'm like, but
but sales has to also support it. If you're making your sales, but other departments are, you're ordering more inventory, you're over
exactly. If you're increasing all of your variable costs without looking at your operations, and we could go into supply chain as a profit center versus a cost center. But if you're doing all of that, it's a great way to drive the top line.
Absolutely.
And reduce the bottom line.
Right. Yeah.
I always say a telltale sign of operations and bad communication and not an overall systems perspective is revenue growing and profits decreasing.
Absolutely. Yes. And that should show up in your KPIs, honestly, right? So it's like when, what I found is like when you're in these meetings and you're going over your monthly KPIs, and even when you're developing your monthly KPIs, right? if you have, sales, and you have production, you have everyone with their KPIs, and you have three departments that just killed it. They're bombing it 100%, whatever. But then everyone else is kind of failing, or that they have red marks. It's like, okay, what's going on here? Because honestly, like since it touches everything, you should have more of a synergized and more consistent KPI, meeting term, right? So to me, like I said, if you like, it's just impossible from what in my experience for three departments to have like absolutely 100% meeting their KPIs, but then everyone else from inventory to procurement, then they're not meeting their goals. Something
right,
is off
logistics,
there,
everything, right? And that's
something is off
and
there.
in the spirit of action items being a show where people take away things that they can go do on Monday, weekend, think about for the rest of the day. Today, on Monday, what can you do? Look at those KPIs. And to your point, if there are a couple of departments that are killing it and a couple of departments that are absolutely not killing it, a lot of times I see that happen in transportation.
Yes, absolutely.
Because you're expediting so much stuff, trying to keep up with whatever the demand side is doing, or stockouts. So your service levels aren't great. You're getting a lot of sales and they're meeting their quotas and exceeding their quotas, but your service level to the customer is way below what you would want it to be, if you're even tracking it, because some people are not. But what you just mentioned, and I also wanted to say this, and I forgot I wanted to mention it earlier. You are not a career consultant. You've been the person doing the job.
Absolutely.
And you've also been the person teaching other people how to do the job. And I think that's a very important thing to say, because I am recently transitioning into, from career consultant to like, I'm now doing the job and responsible for creating the playbook and bringing everyone together. And I'm the empowered person that has the executive authority to go make things happen. And as I'm like putting stuff into, practice that I've always told people, sometimes I'm thinking, well, that was a stupid thing that I would tell people. Like what textbook taught me that does not work in the real world? Or maybe it did 10 years ago, but now with, all of the different middleware that we have and the different automations and AI and everything else, it just doesn't work anymore. But I do think it's important for everyone to know that this isn't like you saying, I am all knowing. This is like you, like this is you saying, this is what I have done.
Exactly.
I was responsible for doing these things. So I do want to make that point. The other point that I wanted to say is, you've been talking about KPIs. There are a couple of things that we have as kind of recurring themes on the show. One thing is, as we're always talking about, implementations, digital supply chain, are those cross-functional KPIs that you've been talking about. So what does that look like for your organization? How do you make these sales goals not just only revenue, how many deals are salespeople closing, but how does it become something more tied to margin? How does it become something that requires, if you want to get your bonus and you want to get your pat on the back, you have to talk to the production team. You have to talk to procurement. What are the KPIs that really drive that communication, as opposed to saying, okay, everybody go communicate.
Right. Exactly.
Email, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
Email. But when it is, okay, we are collectively marching toward this goal, how does communication then change? But how is that then that people have that intrinsic motivation? Say, I'm going to reach out to this person. I'm going to develop that relationship that we've been talking about for the last half hour. Like, I want that relationship because I want to get my piece of the pie, and I can't get my piece of the pie if my partner or, my across the aisle bipartisan, colleague is also not getting their piece of the pie. And I think that's easier said than done.
Yeah, definitely. Most definitely. Yes. Absolutely. Yes. But small changes make a world of difference. Even
Yes.
just engaging, just say, send an email. Hey, who are you, what do you do? Just, and having these meetings, stand ups and having monthly meetings or bi-weekly meetings with everyone, at least one person from a team, right? So that you're understanding not just what you're doing, but how it's impacting everyone else. And like I said, it's one thing that I'm big on is accountability and incentives, right? Because that drives everything. Everyone, when you're accountable for something, then you're going to more than likely 90 something percent of the time, you're going to make sure that you're doing what you're supposed to do, right? Because you're accountable for that. And then with incentives, you're also going to do the same because you're incentivized to do what you're supposed to do.
I like that.
And
Accountability and incentives.
yes,
We do not have an
absolutely.
action item or a banner for it. Accountability and incentives. Accountability and incentives. You've
Yes.
got it in your mind.
Exactly. I mean, that's pretty much the baseline of where we start, right? You have to build that into your KPIs. And, it's just a matter of, communication, and it goes way beyond communication, but just understanding, because you can't communicate with someone if you don't understand, like, right? So for instance, with like the description or the example I gave earlier with procurement, right? Procurement is they have their own goals, right? They're trying to get the best price, the best supplier, the best efficiency, the best, they have a lot of these, different attributes that they're going for who they pick as a supplier, right? But in the meantime, this supplier who we're trying to onboard, if they may have had the production team or the receiving team may have had issues with them in the past, and you don't know that because you're not communicating with them, you're not involving them, or you're not involving the logistics team in that decision, right? Not just from a production floor standpoint, right? And so just offer that insight and, not just, going off of what your siloed KPI is for, just, meeting your KPI of getting so many suppliers onboarded and, having your backup plan and this and that. It goes way further than that, right? Because, like I said, not only just when you select a supplier, but how that supplier performs, right? Because that's also a KPI with, quality and with procurement, right? And so how would you know how that, how they're supplying, I mean, how the suppliers are actually doing if you don't have a connection or communication base with the people who are actually dealing with it on an everyday basis and communicating that information? So it not only makes the organization, it not only builds accountability, but it just creates this thought pattern to, okay, well, let me make sure that, this is that before I make this decision, because this is going to affect this and I don't want to be on this list and I don't want. So if that makes sense, it just drives this subconscious rule of a method for decision making, just having that in your
You
subconscious.
mentioned getting to know people.
Yes.
And I think that you and maybe really like large enterprises do this better. They have affinity groups, and I'm talking like the Apples, the Cokes of the world. There are networking events. I have a friend at Nike, and he's like, I'm so tired of all these networking events that my manager always wants me to go to. So they're doing more stuff. When you get like into the smaller organizations that don't really have that structure, and a lot more is outsourced. I think that it's easy to lose sight of how do I say, not necessarily networking. And what came to mind when you mentioned getting to know the other person is like ultimately, yes, we have to work together, but we also kind of have conflicting goals ish.
Right.
It is what it is. Naturally, as organizations grow, silos happen because you need people to start to like something gets so big that you need someone to focus on that one thing.
Right.
So like that, it is a nature of what we do. You have to be conscious of it. You have to be cognizant of it, and find mitigation strategies. But silos it's natural. You want to break it down as much as possible, but it happens. Right. We don't live in a fantasy world where that's not the case. So you're like, DC, get to the point. So the point is that I remember reading years ago a Harvard Business Review article that took MBA students, and before they started negotiating, it was like 30-minute happy hour. Who are you? What do you do? Do you have kids? Do you like to go to the dog park?
Right.
I enjoy hiking. What was the last triathlon thing that you did? And in just having those conversations, there were more successful negotiations
Yes.
from the opposing teams than just like, okay, let's sit at the table. What do you want to do? What do I want to do? So I guess the point is have more happy hours at work.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So
Right.
that people can talk, like not work stuff. And I'm not
Right.
saying also like not 6 o'clock in the evening, because if you have kids to pick up, you can't get to that. Or if you
Right.
have to relieve a spouse or a partner who works the night shift, you can't go to that. Like cater lunch. You know what I mean? Make it block everyone's time at 2 o'clock on a Wednesday to just
Absolutely.
like talk to each other
Just
and
talk.
learn, because then I'm going to feel less weird about reaching out to Joy.
Exactly.
Like
Yeah.
how do I phrase this? Like, this is weird. And I might just like, hey, I saw you last week. Now I like you. You like me. You know, like this is what I need. How are the kids? You know, kind of thing.
Exactly. You start off just with a soft, introduction, and that's huge. And I know that, like I said, I'm old school, so I'm gonna go back. Like when back in the day, we were doing the whole. Well, Lean Six Sigma is still, paramount now. But one thing that I remember from working with my Asian counterparts is you never ever start a conversation about business unless you ask about until you ask about their family. How are they doing? Those soft skills. I would never forget that, because that has been the driver for, like you said, just initial baseline communication and getting to know that person, right? So that you're not reaching out to them and say, hey, I need this, I need that. But you kind of have a background with them. You kind of know what they do and why they're asking you. And it just makes things less, like you said, weird. And it gives you more of a, incentive to, hey, I'm going to help you because you had that soft introduction. You know who that person is. But, of course, not handing people your business card, that's huge over there. And, and not asking about family, it's almost an insult. And so having that same thought pattern here, in the US is something that I don't feel that we have definitely taken advantage of from a communication and getting to know communication type of perspective.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. And I love how almost every single episode of my show, we talk about digital supply chain, we talk about digital transformation, we talk about systems and data and tools, but ultimately it always comes back to people.
Yeah, always.
Change management, communication, reskilling and upskilling people, bringing people along the way, the what's in it for me, incentivize, like it's all very much human behavior related. And we didn't talk, and I'm watching the time. We got our 5-minute warning. We've got like 2 minutes left. But I mean, I really wanted to get into incentives a little bit more, which I don't think we will have time for. But yeah, like natural human behavior. You want to be rewarded for doing well. And I think that supply chain is kind of as a whole a thankless business function. If things are going well, then like it just goes well. And like you said, yeah, the sales guy got to go to Mexico and like whatever president's honor thing. Meanwhile, like all of my service level has been 95% or above when the goal is 90% all year, and no one has said thank you.
Exactly.
But if my service level goes to 87, everyone is down my back trying to figure out what's wrong with it. So it's one of those, I don't think that supply chain professionals are awarded enough outside of that. Like we know supply chain, like there are supply chain things and, forums and events and awards, but business as a whole, I don't think that supply chain is applauded enough. And I was just talking about this, the like LinkedIn comments earlier this week of like how quickly everyone forgot that like the procurement, strategic partnerships, strategic risk management, strategic supply chain, and like operations and the data and systems, like that got a lot of companies through COVID. And now that we are outside of that and the economy is not great, we have such a short memory because it's all back to just like cost reduction. Like how can we reduce cost, which is great. But like the economy is going to get better again because it's cyclical from the dawn of time.
Right.
Better again. And then like 2021 was not 10 years ago. It's
exactly.
To me how quickly people have forgotten.
Absolutely.
So I just spent 2 minutes on a soapbox, and like I said, when the Mark Calendar's next show comes up, it means I need to stop talking. So let me do my little outro.
Absolutely.
That concludes today's show. Thank you for listening and supporting our show. If today's content resonated with you and you're seeking hands-on support for your business, for software implementations, and you're looking for a holistic perspective, please visit NugentArchitects.com to schedule your discovery session with a member of the team. And if you want to be sure to never miss a show and to catch recordings, you can sign up for the newsletter at NugentArchitects.com. We always send out the recording the following week. You can also sign up for letstalksupplychain.com for their newsletters and updates. So thank you, everyone. Have a great week.
Bye-bye.
We'll see you next month.
Thank you.